by yourself.
Trustee Kavanaugh,
Here.
Trustee Jordy,
Here.
Trustee Smith,
Here.
Trustee Cromer,
Here.
Trustee Shoemaker,
Here.
Trustee Harris is absent, and Trustee Anderson is absent by prior arrangement.
I just saw somebody else. Okay, well, why don't we do the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So the first order of business, I will ask for any public comments on items that are not on the agenda. Any public?
I see no public comment at this time.
Okay, great. And our first order of business then is discussion and possible action authorizing teleconference meetings pursuant to Government Code 54953. The same item we've had several times to allow us to do this meeting over Zoom. So I will need a motion and a second to approve.
Move to
Motion to
approve.
approve.
Okay, I'll second.
Okay, Richard moved and Dan seconded. Any discussion?
I'll add because I am going to vote no. And I know we have some people here today that are sick or, well, let's just say sick. I'd just like to see us get back to in-person meetings. And I think as boards, we should operate at the same standard as the public that we're serving and the members that we serve that are open. In fact, I feel we're held to a higher standard and to be available to those members. And so I feel like that should be in person and not through a video camera. I also feel like it's in support of the other board members. So that way you're all together and unified and working while maybe you do have to address, a member of the public. Today with the people that are sick, I feel like we should go back to our pre-COVID and remember that you can call in sick and you can miss a meeting and, but still bring us together. So I'll just make those comments. This is my last meeting that you'll have to hear it.
Well, I will add to that in that I was thinking, with some of the discussion that we need to have today, particularly the second closed session, it would be nice to be able to look at all your faces around the table. It's just going to be a little bit more difficult this way. So anyway, we need to take a roll call vote on this motion.
Yes. Trustee Forrester,
No.
Trustee Kavanaugh,
Here.
was that a yes or a no?
Yes.
Thank you. Trustee Jordy,
Yes.
Trustee Smith,
Yes.
Trustee Cromer,
Aye.
Trustee Shoemaker.
Aye.
Approved.
Thank you. And our second item of business is sad because we're saying goodbye to Julie. And there's a proclamation that we would like to read. I would like to know if there's any public comments on the proclamation for Julie.
Any public comment at this time?
Okay. So Julie, I'm going to read it first. Proclamation of the Mendocino County Board of Retirement honoring Julie Forrester for her service to the Mendocino County Employees Retirement Association and the Board of Retirement. Whereas Julie Forrester has served as a well-respected Board of Retirement trustee and audit committee appointee since being elected by general members in 2019. Whereas Julie's valuable knowledge and experience in business operations, budget, policy, finance, investments, and true dedication to the County of Mendocino has been a welcome addition to the board. Whereas Julie has exhibited a dedication to her role as a trustee with an unwavering attention to detail that benefits the entire association and membership. She has been a consummate professional in all decisions made as a trustee and always maintained a positive attitude, especially during challenging times. Whereas Julie has assisted the board in making many important decisions regarding investments, consultants, and policies, aiding and addressing the Mendocino County Employees Retirement Association's (IMSERA) long-term sustainability, and exploring options to pay down the unfunded actuarial accrued liability to AAL while being the best possible fiduciary. Whereas Julie's valued contributions to IMSERA include development of the 5-year strategic plan, implementation and monthly review of the historical benefit review project, receipt of an agreeable Internal Revenue Service compliance statement, and procuring new investment in infrastructure. Whereas Julie has proven her commitment to serving as trustee, exhibiting the highest principles of collegiality and respect for IMSERA, its board, staff, and members. Whereas Julie has served the County of Mendocino over 31 years, she plans to enjoy some much-needed time off before her next adventure begins. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Mendocino County Board of Retirement honors and congratulates Julie Forrester for her years of service and expresses its most sincere gratitude. Julia's wish continued success in all future endeavors.
Thank you all. very
And if
much.
everybody was in the room, you'd hear us clap better. You have been a great addition to this board. Your knowledge has really helped us through a lot of things, and I personally respect you and wish that we could have more of
Thank
your, yeah.
I've really enjoyed being on the board, and it has been very challenging, and it's taught me a lot. And for each and every one of you, I have respected you all and learned all from you in different ways. So all those things that were in the proclamation weren't done by me, but were done as a board and together. And I think we work very well together, and I'm grateful for my time and what I've learned. So thank you all for your acceptance and generosity and sharing your knowledge with us.
We will miss you.
Thank you, Julie.
Yes, trustee Cromer.
I just wanted to take a moment to thank Julie. We joined the Retirement Association as trustees around the same period of time, and we went to the trustee training together and developed a friendship and definitely stayed in contact over the time on the board. And I hope that continues in your retirement, and we wish you all the best.
Thank you.
We will move on to the consent agenda. Is there any public comment on the items consent agenda? We have 3 items today. We have minutes of the May 18th meeting, the May 2022 retirement report, and the preliminary monthly financial report.
There's no public comment at this time.
Okay? We will need a motion and a roll call vote. No?
Do this by unanimous consent.
Do we have a Zoom?
Yes.
We can?
Well, they still need a roll call, don't they? Jeff, we need a roll call all the time, right?
We should. I think we have been just approving the consent calendar by unanimous consent, and I'm not concerned either way. If you want to do a roll call, you can. If you want to keep going with unanimous consent, that's fine as well.
I think last month we did a roll call. I'm just trying to follow what we've been doing.
Sure.
but-
We should have a motion.
Better to err on the side of caution.
Do I hear a motion to approve the consent calendar?
So moved.
Okay, we got Julie and Quincy.
I'll second.
Okay, thank you, Quincy. Now roll call.
Okay. Trustee Forrester,
Yes.
trustee Cabinet,
Yes.
trustee Journey,
Yes.
trustee Smith,
Yes.
trustee Cromer,
Aye.
trustee Shoemaker,
Aye.
approved.
Thank you. So we won't have anything on agenda item 4, and agenda item 5 is,
Ma'am, I think you're not looking at the revised agenda.
I'm not?
I could be wrong. I don't have it in front of me. Oh, never mind. I'm sorry. You're right. You're right.
Okay,
I get confused that you guys have 4 here.
well,
Because
Or is.
we didn't use that where I came from.
If we
You
take
2 years in,
anything-
I would have learned.
yeah,
Good morning, Miss Harris.
if we take anything off the consent list for.
Hello, my dear.
Hi,
Hi. I'm sorry. Go ahead and grab a chair anywhere. Doesn't matter where. Contractor.
so I'm going to ignore our executive director's comment. And, agenda item number 5 is closed session conference with legal counsel, anticipated litigation, significant exposure to litigation pursuant to government code 54956.9 D2, wow. Multiple cases threatened in response to a historical benefit review project implementation. So I need to ask if there is any public comment.
There does not appear to be public comment at this time.
Then we will be moving into closed session, and we will report out when our closed session is complete.
It's gonna take a couple minutes here.
Working towards, this is the technical issue that we've been having.
open session, and Jeff, if you want to give a report out, that'd be great.
On closed session, item 5, conference with legal counsel, anticipated litigation, no final action was taken, and direction was given to staff and council.
Thank you. So we will move on then to a discussion of the historic benefit review project. First off, are there any public comments?
Do not see any public comment at this time.
Okay, so, Doris, what would you like to tell
Thank you,
us?
Chair Smith, trustees. The Historical Benefit Review Project report is provided in your packets. You will notice that no accounts were corrected during the month of June. That's really due to staffing shortages here. And I have an update on our recruitment in the administrator's report. Jeff, I hate to ask this, but I brought the wrong notepad in, and I know there was something else you asked me to touch base on during this part, and I don't remember what it is. Do you know?
I think it was perhaps that the Board of Supervisors on Tuesday is going to be considering taking action to address failure number 8.
Thank you, Jeff. My apologies. I didn't have the right notepad here. So were there any questions from any trustees on the project report provided to you this month?
I might ask you to just tell everybody else a little bit about what I asked you about the interest on people who had already taken their money out.
Yes, one of the items added to the correction project when we amended our application was the correction of accounts where the member did not receive the semi-annual interest during the periods of times their account was in an inactive status. Back in 2003, the law changed that allows non-vested members to leave their funds on deposit with the retirement system. That, I think, in part was to make it easier in the future should reciprocity have opportunity arise that occurred within the 6 months of leaving our employment. But allowing them to leave their funds here also required the system pay interest on inactive accounts, which was not provided for in the law prior to January 1 of 2003. Unfortunately, accounts were missed and interest was not applied to inactive accounts. As part of the correction, we had to go back and find individuals, or are finding individuals, who had left employment and taken a refund, and they were also impacted by not receiving interest during the period of time their account had been inactive. So in a couple of areas, not just on the correction project report, where you'll see that last month there was a fair amount of dollars associated with this correction item. That is primarily interest on those members who had already terminated their account, meaning they had taken a refund, but we were going back and correcting that. That includes not just the period of interest they missed between when they separated employment and were in interest to the date of the termination, but also interest on that interest to this date. It has essentially established them with a small, most cases, a relatively small account balance, although there were a few that got a sizable amount of inactive interest. And that's also reflected on the retirement report that was part of your consent agenda. If you look at the graph, you'll see a large uptick in the number of inactive non-vested accounts. These were folks being added back onto our rolls who had already taken a refund, but now they have an account balance due to this correction project.
Thank you. Any other questions from trustees? Then we will move on to agenda item 7, discussion regarding realignment of reserve accounts and reporting reserve accounts. Director Rensler.
Thank you, Chair Smith. Robert and I have spoken with both our actuary and our external auditors regarding this. And Robert prepared a staff memo as part of your board packets. And I also will turn any questions over to him if you have any detailed questions. But it has come to light through our actuarial valuation that due in part to the way MSERA processes division of interest to the reserves, that once a reserve actually went negative, we started crediting negative interest to it that caused it to diverge faster and quicker from its associated liability. We have stopped that process in conjunction with those discussions with our actuary and our auditor, but our actuary had suggested that we do a realignment of funds between the reserve accounts to more closely align them with the associated liability of those reserve accounts. This will not have any impact on the employer contribution. The contribution rates would have been the same. This is just realigning our reserves and would affect going forward how much is attributed to regular COLA, but wouldn't change the overall contribution percent. There's no impact to the employer rates from this at all. And I'm happy to open it up to questions. That was the one regarding what we were colloquially referring to as the COLA drift issue. Secondly, included in your board memo, we have the fact that we are the last and now the only system in the serial plans that uses book value on our records as opposed to actuarial value. Again, we had discussions with the actuary and with our auditors, Brown Armstrong, and the consensus has been that MSERA should make a conversion to the actuarial value basis as opposed to the book basis for these reserve accounts. And I'm happy to address any questions, or Robert and I are happy to address any questions you may have.
It may not be simply, but how would that, can you give an example of what change that would entail in a value?
As far as the second item with the conversion to book?
Yes, from book to actuarial.
Our actual financial statements and the annual financial report that we publish don't actually provide any information on our reserves. Our reserves are really only used in information we provide to the actuary, and the actuary is making a conversion every year from our book value to actuarial value based on the liabilities and proportional share for those reserves. Robert, I don't know if you can address this better than I can, but we would be looking at making this change with the next fiscal year because we've already set rates for the current year and we don't want to have to realign any of those. Again, there wouldn't be a change in the total employer rate, but we've already adopted specific regular and COLA contributions and we don't want to alter those for what were already adopted by the Board of Supervisors. Robert, do you have anything to add on the impact of the transition from book to actuarial value?
The only thing I would add is that the valuation report would change slightly. Page 21, in the last few years, the page number has kind of shifted around, but since the 2018 valuations, the actuary has been producing a page somewhere between page 20 and 22. I believe it was on page 22 in the 21 report, where they show our book value of reserves, and then they allocate the actuarial value of assets to those reserves. So that step in the actuarial process and that page in the report will go away. So a little bit less work for Siegel because they won't necessarily have to do that conversion anymore. And that page will be gone.
But it doesn't affect our financial statement.
It does not affect the financial statements that we publish, whether the semi-annual ones the board sees or the annual one where we publish with the AFR or whatever the acronym is now. And with that, it would bring us in line sort of with best practices of what every other system is doing. We are the only system left of the 37 Act systems carrying our reserves at book. And additionally, I think we're the only plan Siegel has, period, not just within the 37 Act, but everywhere that is doing that.
We are unique. Any further questions or comments?
And Jeff, I don't know if we wrote this as an action item. Does it require action? Or is this more of just letting the board know that we were planning on making these changes?
It says discussion.
Well, it's not agendized as an action item, but I'm not hearing that there's any action that the board needs to take, at least at this point.
We really just wanted to bring it in front of the board and address any questions you had to make sure that you didn't have significant concerns with anything being proposed.
Great. Okay, thank you. Item number 8, discussion regarding submission of letter of concern or opposition to Assembly Bill 2493, the county employees' retirement disallowed compensation benefit adjustments. Any public comment on this agenda item?
There's no public comment to this one.
Thank you. Director Rentschler.
Thank you, Chair Smith. I had provided trustees with an email and a copy of the Assembly Bill 2493 for your reference after the county State Association of Counties, whatever, California State Association of Counties made a letter of objection to AB 2493. The true impact of this bill is unknown, due in part to the unclear requirements of the bill. I've had several discussions with fiduciary counsel regarding how exactly this would impact us, and their answer is they're not 100% sure because it's poorly written. But they said it is quite likely that we would end up being subject to this bill. The bill originally was crafted for Orange County, and then it was amended to apply to all of the serial systems. There is an attempt within it to sort of align or make serial systems subject to some of the provisions of the CalSTRS or CalPERS legislation, and their rules do different from the serial, so it creates some confusion trying to figure out what rules would apply to us. The takeaway from this is that for safety classifications whose benefits were reduced subject to recalculation due to the PEPRA regulations and specifically the Alameda decision, the system would have to perform an actuarial calculation or pay to have one done to calculate the value of the lost benefit, so to speak, and calculate the cost of a penalty the employers would pay. There could be complications with our accepted correction methodology, and I don't want to go into a lot of detail there just because we don't really know the full impact that this could have, but my recommendation is that we go ahead and submit a letter of opposition to this bill as currently amended.
The opposition letter that was presented in here by CSAN doesn't go into a lot of detail. Are you proposing something similar to that?
It would be similar. It may be slightly more crafted to the specific impact from the plan perspective, because of course CSAC was running from the county perspective. At least 3 other systems, including Sonoma and Marin, and maybe Santa Barbara, I don't recall right now, have already submitted letters of opposition or letters of concern. And this bill has already made it out of committee and is expected, I believe, to make it to the governor's desk this summer. We're looking at trying to get on the record, essentially before it goes there, our opposition, because it would require the system to expend our resources in getting these actuarial calculations. And there's a number of concerns on from the county and plan sponsor side that this would be a gift of taxpayer funds and the penalty that they have to pay, but that is separate from our issue, which is the cost and the staff time we would incur trying to comply with this. As I did mention, this affects safety membership. It could be expanded to include general membership. The safety membership make up about 31% or so of the total Alameda corrections we had already processed. And unlike some systems, we had already processed and made all of our Alameda corrections, and we would need to go back and do some additional work should this be enacted. And I think there's two comments. I don't know whose hand went up first.
I think it was Richard.
Okay, all right, trustee Shoemaker.
Do you know if Sackers has taken a position yet and LA County?
Sackers indicated that they didn't have time to take a position on it before it went out of committee, but that I believe they feel that they are not supportive of this as written either, as amended.
Okay, so an outcome in several counties are about, I think about 18% of the membership of CSAC, and LA County usually sits on the board of CSAC, is our largest serial. So
I do not know specifically about LA County. I haven't heard from them. I do know the county of Sacramento, not the retirement system, made their own letter in support of the CSAC position against the bill.
Thank you.
Jeff?
Thanks. So if the board wants to give direction to the executive director and the chair to craft a letter, it would be consistent with the memo. And just to highlight, and I think Doris really hit on them, but there's just some aspects to the proposed legislation that are confusing to the attorneys who practice in this area and the staff who work with it. They talk about an appeal and the timing of appeals and when that gets triggered. And they're also raising a question of memorandums of understanding between the plan sponsors and the members as to that is the determination of whether something is pensionable. And of course, that's a decision for this board. It also refers to CalPERS regulations, and their statutes aren't the same as ours. And the other unique piece that we have here at MCERA is we also don't know, as Doris laid out in her memo, how this could potentially affect our project corrections. So there are some areas of concern.
I would move approval of sending an opposition letter.
Okay.
What happened?
We just lost you, Richard, but.
We lost everyone. I think our internet.
We can hear you.
We can hear you.
Okay.
Okay, good.
Good, so we
I'll
have,
second the motion.
There you are.
There, don't look again. We'll lose.
so moved by Richard, seconded by Quincy. Any further discussion on the motion?
Just a question, whether we want to actually oppose or express a letter of concern.
I was going to make it a letter of opposition, not a letter of concern, but that can be a direction of the board.
Yeah, that means actively working.
Richard, you made the motion for opposition. Okay.
Yep.
Thank you. Okay, we need a roll call vote then.
Trustee Forrester,
Yes.
trustee Cavnas,
Sorry about that. Yes.
thank you. Trustee Jordy.
He's out.
Oh, he's out, oh, that's right, he's out of his meeting. Trustee Smith,
Yes.
trustee Cromer,
Aye.
trustee Shoemaker,
Aye.
trustee Harris,
Aye.
approved.
And just to let you know, we do expect trustee Jordan back. He had another commitment that could not be rescheduled.
That would be back up.
Okay. Okay, thank you. We will, work on that draft or that letter and,
It's already started. I originally had planned to include it in the packet, but I wanted to run some things through council before anything was distributed publicly. So that's why it wasn't in your packets today. But I'll work with the chair and council and we'll get that sent out as soon as it's finalized.
great, thank you. Moving on to agenda item number 9, discussion and possible action regarding investment matters. First of all, do we have any public comment on the investment portion of our agenda?
There's no public comment?
Thank you. So do you want me to ask Robert or turn it
Yep, I'm
over
going
to
to
you?
turn this one directly over to Robert.
Okay. Robert, we are on the monthly investment performance report and your memo regarding, however you want to say it, our REEF America.
Yes, trustees, you have before you the monthly investment report, which just goes over our monthly returns. It was an overall slight increase there, about $5 million from the previous month. And we've also got the informational memo on REEF America 2's proposed restructure that will be voted on next month at their annual meeting. And so the memo basically goes over the major changes. For us, until we pass that $50 million net asset value, we're not going to see any impact from these changes. We're paying 95 basis points today, and we will continue until we surpass that threshold. It's really just informational, and wanted to check to see if the board had any issues or concerns about the proposed restructure.
Any comments, questions?
I have a question for Jeff.
Yes.
Jeff, are we allowed to make some general comments about investments here, even though an item may not have been agendized, just for board information?
I think so.
I just wanted to let the board know that we're expecting the last capital call for our infrastructure investment, and that Robert's working on that currently. So you will see some realignment as we rebalance to pull funds to meet the infrastructure commitment.
Great.
I don't know if you already said that. I didn't hear it, Robert. I didn't see it, but
No.
I apologize for stealing your thunder.
That's okay. Additionally, we're going to be sending REEF $450,000 July 1st also, and that will be the final capital commitment towards them from our recent re-up in our recent commitment in December of last year.
Okay.
So you'll see that moving almost $6.5 million. You'll see that as a pending trade in this month's financial report that you'll receive next month.
Okay, thank you for that. So no action necessary on the investment matters. Thank you, Robert. We'll move on to some policy discussions. Item number 10 is a discussion and possible action regarding actuarial practices and funding policy. Any public comment on the actuarial policy?
There is no public comment.
So I will turn this over to Director Rensler.
Thank you, Chair Smith. trustees, the actuarial funding policy is, I think, due for review not until next year, but I brought it back this year to discuss the actuarial audit. We will be RFPing for a firm to perform our actuarial audit, which per the policy occurs once every 7 years. As part of some research to look into what we would present for RFP requirements, I came across the fact that there are different levels of audit, and that there is one system, Serial system, who uses what's referred to as a level 2 audit. It's not quite as detailed as a full replication, which is what MSERA has always done in the past. But they say in some regards, it's, while technically less expensive, they do it more frequently. They align their actuarial audit to be done right before they make a determination whether or not to continue using their consulting actuary, and they're using the result of the audit as support for a decision on whether or not to continue with their current consulting actuary or RFP for a replacement consultant. So I drafted potential changes to the policy that would give the board some flexibility to decide whether or not they wanted to do a level 1 full replication audit or a level 2 audit, and the flexibility in timing of it, whether they wanted to make it more frequently or stick with a once every 7-year audit cycle. I spoke with our consulting actuary. They said they do not have any concerns over staying with once every 7 years. I looked at the GFOA standards, and they suggest a best practice of once every 5 years. And I just wanted to throw some things out there for the board's consideration. If the board isn't interested in these changes, they can reject them, and we would just continue with the policy as currently written. I'm happy to address any questions you may have regarding any of the proposed changes or the information in the memo regarding the different levels of actuarial audit.
I think I was struck by the flexibility in the paragraph that was optional. I mean, that we may or may not, simply because I'm used to policy saying exactly what you do when. So I was interested in that. It does give us the ability, depending upon the situation, to choose a level 1 or level 2. I like the fact that we could do something more frequently, but maybe not as detailed. I do like that. I don't know whether I like it enough that I would say this is how we always do it, or to leave that very flexible paragraph in there.
From our consulting actuary standpoint, they say more frequent auditing probably isn't necessary unless you've identified an issue or you had significant changes with your system, your pension software, some accounting practices. But some of the things may not come to light unless you do an actuarial audit. Things like errors in contribution rates and reserves that I think several serial systems had issue with, including MSERA in the past, with an issue with employer or employee contribution rates not quite being correct, or and having to make those correction projects. And I think some of those items came to light through an actuarial audit. So, I don't know what the best frequency is. GFOA suggests once every 5 years, which is more frequently than what we currently have in the policy. But it's not as frequent as, let's say, Tulare County, who's doing a level 2 audit every 3 years.
Mm-hmm. And the paragraph that you propose taking out says 6, not 7. Just want to point that out. But that's okay. Yes, Jeff.
Thanks. So given the chair's comments and the executive director, I don't know if the trustees are trying to figure out what the best path is, but to help perhaps guide the discussion, I mean, you always fall back on your fiduciary duty, and so what's the best practices out there? You've heard what the GFOA recommends, and so it sounds like it's more frequent than what we have right now. So that's a bit of a guide. And Obviously, the more you do, the more conservative you are. Of course, there's a cost to it, but more likely that you're fulfilling your fiduciary obligations. So, where do you draw that line? Reasonable minds can differ, but the GFOA is probably a pretty good indicator of best practices.
Would it make any sense to change the policy from 6 to 5 years, but then leave the flexibility of a level 1 or level 2 up to the circumstances at the time?
I have no problem with changing it to once every 5 years to be in line with the GFOA best practices. And whether or not the board wishes to leave the flexibility to select a level 1 or level 2 audit, I would leave to the board. Sometimes it's nice just to know that you're going to do X. I didn't even know there were different levels of audits available. And every place I've worked has always used the full replication as a methodology for auditing their actuary. There are some differences between the two, and I would defer to the board on whether or not the board wants that flexibility.
Comments from trustees?
I think we should just defer to level 1, the full scope, and make that investment and have it more frequent. Am I understanding you said next year's the next audit?
Robert, our timeline for getting the audit in place is to audit for the June 30, 22, but we would be doing that probably spring of 23, right?
Yes, yes.
And so the reason I ask is because of the comment that they believe that once every 6 years is adequate unless there's recent changes or benefit formulas or assumptions and so I think of the historical benefit review project and its impact to the unfunded. So I'm thinking that's a good timing that we have one coming up and is better. That would be a major change, I would assume. So anyway, I'm for level 1 in 5 years.
Level 1, 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
I can certainly make those changes. Would the board want to see the policy again, or can it just be adopted with the verbal changes? That again would be up to the board. I'm happy to bring it back if you want, or we can just finalize the changes based on direction provided today.
I think if there's not any further discussion, I would like to hear a motion. And Julie, maybe
I'll move to update our recurring actuarial audits to at least once every 5 years. At least, yeah, according to the GFOA recommendation to provide actuarial audits at least once every 5 years. A level 1 audit.
second. Any further discussion? It has been moved and seconded to change the current wording from 6 years to 5 years and to add level 1 into the wording. It doesn't currently have level 1 in the wording. That's
Her specification was to use a level 1 audit, so I think that should be in the policy, so we don't have to come back with your next, person in 5 years saying, oh, hey, do you know they have more than one level of audit?
And would you add to your motion that it wouldn't have to come back with that change being made, wouldn't have to come back to the board again if they make those changes?
Your motion would be amended to adopt the policy with your changes as specified, so I don't have to bring it back for board consideration.
Thank you. See, this is why Robert's Rules of Orders are so amazing. No, this is good. I so move to amend my motion to, sorry, I'm gonna need some help here.
To adopt the policy.
To adopt the policy with the changes
As
Super.
as.
And as a seconder, I second that.
Okay. All right, everybody clear on the motion?
Have further
Vote on the
discussion.
amendment
Question.
first.
Madam
Oh,
Chair,
yes. Further discussion. Sorry, Quincy, I didn't see your hand.
thank you. It may be a Jeff question or maybe the executive director, but just because that's the base minimum, that doesn't mean we can't do a different audit in between those times, correct? If we choose to do so, like a level 2?
I would say that's correct. The policy would require a level 1 audit at least every 5th year. but that wouldn't prevent the board or preclude you from auditing or from ordering another audit more frequently than that, even if it's a different level.
Perfect. Thank you.
Good. Any further discussion? Then we need a roll call vote.
All right, trustee Forrester,
Yes.
trustee Cadmus,
Yes.
trustee Jordy. He's absent, sorry. Trustee Smith,
Yes.
trustee Cromer,
Aye.
trustee Shoemaker,
Aye.
and trustee Harris.
Aye.
Approved.
Technically, that wasn't Robert's Rules of Order.
No, it wasn't,
Well-
because I don't have that down.
Yeah, I don't.
Yeah, you vote on the
We use a
amendment,
modifier.
and then it becomes the main motion, but we did well.
We don't require anybody to stand up to get the floor.
So we will move on to agenda item 11, which is discussion and possible action regarding a telework policy. Are there any public comments?
There are no public comments.
Thank you, Judy. So Director Inchler, telework.
Thank you. Trustees, this policy is being brought back off cycle. It was last adopted in June of 2020. I'm bringing it back early simply to bring our policy in line with the county's telework policy. I've modified a few of the terms so they're aligned with terms used in the county's policy, so there's no confusion over what something means. And just put in a paragraph that says that Sarah's use of telework would conform with the county's policy regarding eligibility, equipment, applications, and security, and that I'm incorporating the county's policy in by reference. The policy that the county has now has an application process which outlines the frequency and the schedule that someone may telework, and I think that use is helpful in defining when you would expect an employee to be present or teleworking, and provide some other details of the county's policy was attached for your reference. If you have any questions regarding it, I'm happy to address any questions the trustees may have.
I have a comment, or a question, I suppose. In the termination of the agreement, it looks like the employee or the department can terminate it, but it's not specific about the notice requirement. So if the department chose to terminate, it just says immediately, which I guess envisioning the employee there, I think there should be some number of days specific so they can, if with a change in work schedule, I believe like the county contract for the employees notices at least 5 days before their work schedule changes, so that I feel like there should be something more
Was
specific.
that reference on?
It's the county.
In the county's
In the
policy,
county.
they don't specify. We could
Yeah.
certainly add to our policy that changes or termination need 5-day notice.
Advance,
Advance notice.
In the first paragraph under our policy guidelines, it says it may be terminated by either or both when no longer mutually beneficial. That could be where some timeline. I was very surprised at the detail of the county's policy.
Yeah, me
And
too.
I'm wondering how many other institutions and companies throughout the world have made these changes during this pandemic time and remote work. It's just amazing to me. And I see trustee Cromer have a comment or a question.
Mine was the same suggestion as yours under section 3, where we could add that language about the date. And then also at the bottom of page 1, it says the board reviewed this policy on June 17th of 2020. That would need to be amended as well.
In the draft, I have the board amended this policy now June 15th, 2022.
On some pages, it says one thing and on
Oh,
some
I'm
pages.
sorry, the
Yeah.
footer did not get updated on all the pages. I apologize. I updated the footer. I thought it updated all of the footers, but I'll make sure to get that fixed.
Thank you.
Sorry. Okay.
I was going over this yesterday at my daughter's house. My son-in-law works remotely, and I read him some of these. And he said, no wonder government's so expensive.
Were you within 75-minute commute time from here?
I was.
Okay.
I was in Windsor.
That's required because technically we are all emergency service workers as employees of the county. They want to be able to call you in. And if I'm remote working from San Diego or something, I'm not going to be able to show up if there is an emergency and they're making employees come in as emergency service workers.
Right. Good point.
And that was an issue for James because he was out of state for.
It became an issue at one
It
particular
did,
time.
yes.
Yeah. And then, I mean, some of that's just very interesting. Give a 1 hour notice and they can show up and check out your remote work site.
That seems unlikely, but for us.
When you're in your jammies and.
Yeah, I'd have to clean my office.
I know.
I'd have to dig it out.
Any other comments on this? And if not, I would entertain a motion to approve with the amendments adjusted about the putting in a timeline. Anybody?
So moved.
That was a
Second.
Richard, okay, and Catherine.
Second.
Any further discussion? Thank you, too. Then we need a roll call vote on this one.
Trustee Forrester,
Yes.
trustee Kavner,
Yes.
trustee Smith,
Yes.
trustee Cromer,
Aye.
trustee Shoemaker, trustee
Sure.
Shoemaker,
Aye.
trustee Harris,
Aye.
approved.
Thank you. I'm just looking ahead at the agenda and wondering if you all would like a break at this time, or do you want to push on through?
Let's push on.
Okay, I think we're expecting trustee Dirty back into the meeting about 10 a.m. just for your reference.
Okay.
I have no preference one way or the other on whether anybody needs a break.
Okay, anybody, want to take a break now? I heard two in-house say, let's push on. Okay with you guys? Okay. All right, let's move on to agenda item number 12, discussion and possible action regarding communication strategy. Are there any public comments regarding agenda item 12?
There are no public comments.
Thank you, Judy. So Director Rentschler, would you introduce this topic?
Thank you, Chair. The communications policy was originally drafted several years ago and reflects the strategic objectives and circumstances that the system was in at that time. Now, with the adoption of the new strategic plan, I have brought this back to find out if the board still wishes to publish a communication strategy, and if so, if the edits to update the goals and strategic objectives meet with the board's approval. This was originally adopted June of 2018. It was on our schedule for review every 3 years, but it was delayed because we were in the process of reviewing the strategic plan and only recently adopted that. So this item is coming back to try to be consistent with this document with our strategic plan that was adopted in May.
Okay, trustee comments? Well, I personally would like to see it updated as you have and keep it on the books. I think it indicates our, what do I want to say? Our will, I can't think of the right word. Commitment, or something that we want to be able to be open and available and communicate everything fairly. So I would like to keep it on.
I agree, and I think it's a good document to reference for any new trustees coming in review for the communication strategy.
Good point. So I would entertain a motion to adopt this as amended.
So moved.
Second,
It's been moved and seconded to adopt the communication strategy as amended. Any further discussion? So roll call vote, Judy?
Trustee Forrester,
Yes.
trustee Kavanaugh,
Yes.
trustee Smith,
Yes.
trustee Cromer,
Aye.
trustee Shoemaker, trustee Harris.
aye.
Approved.
They're gonna call us the three eye amigos.
Yeah, I got on the eyes last time.
Yeah, I
haven't
know
done it
you
yet this
did.
time, yeah. Thank you. Moving on to agenda item 13, discussion of possible action regarding the audit committee charter. Any public comment on this item? Seeing none, I will move on to ask trustees for comments and questions.
I'd like to move that we adopt the audit committee's charter as presented or as modified by the board.
A second.
Okay, thank you, Catherine. So comments and questions?
I would like a brief, to make a brief comment.
Yes, thanks.
So this does include a modification to the committee responsibilities. And there is a committee responsibility to approve the objectives and the scopes of the annual audit. And as part of that, we would be incorporating essentially an audit kickoff meeting that the committee would be involved with. We do have some rough dates around the end of June that Brown Armstrong could accommodate that for this year. Going forward, it would probably be in May, and that would leave the audit committee a kickoff meeting to review the scope and make any suggested changes if they had any concerns, and then also the approval meeting in November. So I just wanted to make sure that the board understood that modification here.
I did notice there was a change there. Thank you. You know, my only question, and it has to do with the last one as well. We have policies, and this one's called a charter, and the other one was a strategy. I mean, what is all the difference?
We have charters that define the responsibilities of specific positions like the board, the executive director, and the audit committee. We have policies to give board direction, and I have no idea why the communication strategy is called a strategy and not a policy. We could modify that to be the communication strategy policy, if that would be helpful. And we could then incorporate the format and the language to make it similar to all the other policies, including a last revised or amended and adopted by section that is not included in that communication strategy document. That started before I got here, so I think it was a way to bring forth the goals of the strategic plan and the practice of how communications would be brought forth from trustees, with the public, with the media, etc. But it's not labeled a policy. I don't know.
Could we
We do actually have a communications policy that is separate from the communications strategy.
Oh,
So I don't know if you want to merge them or I wasn't sure why this was wound up on a review schedule since it's not a policy, but since it was on our review schedule, I wanted to bring it back because I was making such substantive changes to it, and it was passed, adopted by the board.
Well, let's take them one at a time. First, we have a motion and a second to adopt the audit committee charter as amended. If there are no further comments on that, Judy, would you take a roll call vote?
Ms. Forrester,
Yes.
trustee Kavanaugh,
Yes.
and trustee Smith,
Aye.
trustee
Yay.
Cromer,
Aye.
trustee Shoemaker.
Aye.
Trustee Harris.
yes.
What are you doing? So,
Being snarky.
I don't know if, I don't want to change anything we've already done, but
We can bring that back for a future discussion regarding the distinction between the communication policy and the communication strategy, and that way we can agendize it.
could you bring them back together?
Yes, absolutely, it would be together.
Okay,
Maybe later this summer, I'm not sure, I'm kicking it into next month, but.
right, okay.
All
All right.
the communications policy is probably scheduled. in the
I think we just
near future.
adopted it like
Probably.
3 months ago, but
Okay.
we'll
All right.
take a look at it. We'll bring them back to try to align them.
Okay, do we have any other weird ones sitting out there?
Not that I'm aware of. That's not
Okay.
to say that we don't. I may not just be aware of it yet.
Okay, thank you, that'd be great. Okay, agenda item 14, we do have 3 policies, discussion of possible action, policy schedule for review with no substantive modifications. That's the travel policy, the budget adoption policy, and the determination of pensionable compensation and compensation earnable policy. So we, do you want to have any intro on that?
These policies are really just coming back, being indexed for the last reviewed and adopted date by the board, and there are no substantive changes. So rather than have them as 3 separate, I bundled them together for one action. If there are no reasons to pull any of the policies for board directed changes, certainly we can incorporate any changes as directed by the board.
I don't know if any of you had the problem, but I tried again and I could not open the budget adoption policy.
Seriously.
Yeah.
I mean, what? I don't even have.
I had to open that one on Filer.
I did too.
Oh, okay.
It didn't work on our online.
Yeah.
Oh, that's true.
Yep, that link is broke. My apologies. I don't know what happened. We had it working earlier and we made some changes when we had to renumber some things and maybe we got the link broke at that point. My apologies.
Well, if there's no changes to it, I'm not too worried about it, but, any comments or questions or motion to approve these policies for their, triennial review, or is it 3 years?
Yes, for these are 3 years.
I will move that we approve the 3, go back to where it is, the 3 policies as of June of 2022, travel, budget adoption, and determination of pensionable compensation and compensation earnable policy. What a mouthful.
Yes.
Bless you.
Is there a second for that?
I'll second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Then a roll call vote for item number 14.
Trustee Forrester,
Yes.
trustee Kavanaugh,
Yes.
trustee Smith,
Aye.
trustee Cromer,
Aye.
trustee Shoemaker,
Aye.
and trustee Harris.
Aye.
Approved.
Okay, moving on to item 15, discussion of possible action regarding resolution 2022-13, defining compensation earnable pursuant to government code section 31461 for members who are not subject to government code section 7522.34.
I apologize that the cover memo explaining the changes does not seem to be attached currently. These changes are to reflect the addition of a new pay code for the Mendocino County Law Enforcement Management Association, who are exempt employees, and this would provide them essentially a type of overtime pay, even though they are exempt. These would be non-pensionable as an overtime pay, would not be includable in either pensionable compensation or compensation earnable. I'm sorry, so with the first resolution is to adopt that as non-pensionable for members who are non-PEPR members.
Okay. And I appreciate that because I didn't know what McLEMA meant.
Madam Chair,
Yes,
I have a question for Jeff because I belong to that bargaining unit. Do you have any issues with me participating or voting on this matter?
I do not.
Thank you.
any further discussion? How about a motion to approve?
So moved.
Motion to approve resolution 2022-13.
Yes, that's okay.
Okay.
Okay, Richard, will you second that motion from Julie?
Second.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion? And we'll take a roll call vote.
Trustee Forrester,
Yes.
trustee Kavner,
Yes.
trustee Smith,
Aye.
trustee Cromer,
Aye.
trustee Shoemaker,
Aye.
trustee Harris,
Aye.
approved.
Thank you. Moving on to agenda item 16. It is the same, a resolution for PEPRA members. Is there any public comment?
There is no public comment.
So any further discussion, or I will entertain a motion?
I'd just like to ask a question. We have these type of items come fairly regularly. And I think that has a lot to do with maybe the codes that are being set up by the county and the payroll system as well. This one, it looks like a bargaining item. I'm wondering if we can have them in the future board meetings similarly to 14 where you had them listed and they can be, we can take them as one vote.
Yes, I left them separate because historically they've always been separate resolutions and separately adopted here. I would not have a problem combining those onto one action item if council has no objection.
It's fine.
Great, we'll do that in the future. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Did we get a motion on this? Oh, Richard, comment, question.
Do we have a choice on these issues to be vote them
In
up?
some regards, you do, as far as the determination of whether or not it's pensionable. Now, internally, we've developed a pay item request form that the employer has to submit to us, and then we fill out a determination form that utilizes the guidelines provided in the serial and PEPRA to define whether or not it should fall within a classification as pensionable or non-pensionable. But there are distinctions between different systems on what they determine is pensionable or not pensionable, in part because sometimes things can be set up slightly differently, that it's different enough that it may qualify as pensionable in one jurisdiction and not in another jurisdiction. And those distinctions, I think, are why we now have a very formalized process to review each pay item to bring forth the recommendation to the board. If the board felt strongly that my recommendation was incorrect and they could explain to me, where their support is within the serial or PEPRA regulations to include it, I'm certainly open to that because, I'm looking at it from one perspective and my understanding of the code. And I will tell you, the code is complex and I could easily not necessarily see something. And even on this, I get calls from other systems, and I called another system regarding the hiring incentive bonus that was done to make sure that I had somebody else agree with my recommendation.
Mm-hmm.
So that's it. That's very interesting that there is those different interpretations, and I don't know if that's something that SACers would take up to talk about. But the other thing that I think would be kind of a transparency to this is each time we do this, that we send a letter to the plan sponsor stating that under our UAAL policies, these could increase the UAAL, also can increase sponsor contributions and so forth. So every time they do this kind of action, it's on our record and their record that they are affecting their liabilities.
That's a good
Yeah.
suggestion.
I can certainly send them confirmation of the board's decision, and that certain decisions may impact their contributions, in the future or their liability, but, you look like you wanted to say something, Jeff.
No, I was just thinking it's the plan sponsor who decides what the benefits are. We decide whether they're you decide whether they're pensionable or not. But there's no reason that you can't increase communications, but I'm assuming they know that.
Who would you want it to go to? Just out of curiosity. Plan sponsor means it is an all-encompassing term. Would that be the executive office, or would that be HR who worked on development of the pay item, or would it be the auditor, controller, payroll people who work with us in filling out that pay item request form?
So that could be a board-to-board communication. It could be to the executive committee and board of supervisors. I think those are the people that are primarily involved with tracking the county's liabilities. And, you know, in our current UAL system, giving raises and doing enhancements trigger a different time frame for recovery than, you know, general non-performance by the markets. And so, you know, them understanding that, you know, this may change something over a shorter period of time. That's a little more complicated. I just think it's good public policy to let them know what their financial liabilities are increased by what they've sent us to do.
If I may add a comment, I guess I have a little concerns about that, Richard, because I feel the plan sponsor is negotiating with the bargaining unit for these benefits, and that should be part of their due diligence in figuring out the impact to the county budget and funds, including unfunded liability. And I don't know, I don't feel that that's something that we should monitor for the plan sponsor. I think that that's their obligation through their bargaining.
I can say that I have been in contact with plan sponsor representatives, typically HR, who's involved with some of the labor items, to ask specifically if they set up this pay code in such a manner, what would be my potential recommendation to the board if they go ahead and get that pay code added and adopted by the board of supervisors. So the plan sponsors, for the most part, are reaching out in advance to find out what the impact would be. Now, this being an overtime pay code and not being pensionable would not have any effect on the employer contributions or any liability in this case.
Any further conversation?
Quincy has his hand up.
I don't see that hand on that background very easily, the white background, okay. Yes, Quincy.
Yeah, I had two comments related to the discussion Richard had brought up. The first being that the vast majority of these resolutions that we see are defining things that are not pensionable, so it would not have that impact. And I do agree with him that when we have one that comes up that may be considered pensionable or we vote is pensionable, that might be an opportunity to reach out if it's before the vote or after our decision. And the reason I think that these are important, even though we get them regularly, is because of things like the Alameda decision, where there was some ambiguity as to what was considered pensionable. And it took many, many years for the courts to sort out that mess. And now we're still cleaning it up because of the differences in the retirement systems and what they determined was pensionable and not.
Okay, thank you. So we do need, did we get a motion on that? We do need a motion and a second for agenda item 16, Pepra.
Madam Chair, I move that we approve resolution 2022-14 as amended and proposed.
Second, thank you. Thank you. Any further discussion? A roll call vote.
Trustee Forrester,
Yes.
trustee Cavanagh,
Yes.
trustee Jordy,
Yes.
trustee Smith,
Aye.
trustee Cromer,
Aye.
trustee Shoemaker.
Aye.
And trustee Harris,
Aye.
approved.
Moving on to agenda item 17, discussion regarding the administrative report. Are there any public comments?
There is no public comment.
So Director Rentschler, you have some questions for us, I see.
Thank you, Chair Smith. So today's update includes the status of our recruitment for retirement specialists. We had a total of 27 applicants, and Human Resources is going to be running a qualifications appraisal panel the week of the 20th. Robert has agreed to sit in on that panel. I am not on it because I wanted to be on the hiring panel, and they frown on me being on both. So with that, we expect to have a list of candidates sometime in late June or early July. It will likely come while I'm on vacation. I have vacation scheduled Monday the 27th through Tuesday, July 6th. But I already told staff I would make myself available for interviews via Zoom so we can ensure that the hiring process isn't slowed down by my time off. So that's the status of the recruitment. We also are in the middle of running an election for the general membership seat 2 of the board. This is the one that was vacated by Trustee Forrester when she became acting treasurer. Ballots were mailed out on June 3rd, and the deadline to receive ballots back is June 17th, which is this Friday, 2 days from now. The Board of Supervisors will be certifying the election, I believe, and I have that in here tentatively as July 12th. And the new trustee could be sworn in and available at our meeting for July 20th. The next item in the report is information on our information technology plan. As you recall, I'm sorry, Trustee Shoemaker, did you have questions before I move on?
Yeah, who are the candidates, please?
We don't have any names yet, sir. There's no eligibility list established.
I think he means on the
Oh, you
trustee.
mean for the
Oh,
election?
for the election, Judy might remember them. I forgot already.
I'm Mr. Rob Fitzsimmons and I'm Mr. Vincent Hawkins.
They're both general members, obviously, and active general members are eligible to vote.
And Doris, quick question on the trying to hire someone new. How does the 27 number compare to what we had when we were looking to hire a few months back?
We had roughly 10 candidates, almost all of whom were internal to the county. We did have some external, and I do not know of the 27 how many may be internal county candidates or from the public, but we ran the recruitment 1 week longer than we did last time to try to get more response, and we also advertised it in the regional newspaper. Is that correct, Judy? So we tried to make sure that we got that out there for both a broader audience and then also a longer time period.
Excellent.
And our plan is to hire 2.
Yes, we have 2 retirement specialist positions open. We will use this candidate list to fill both of those positions.
Thank you.
Okay, on to information technology plan.
Okay, as part of our strategic plan, we will be obtaining an IT master plan or an IT roadmap to identify our technological needs for the coming 5 years and looking at ways we can leverage our existing technologies to improve our efficiencies and effectiveness in serving our membership. So we will be issuing a request for quotations, It's not a formal RFP because we expect the budgetary price to be a little bit lower, but it's going to include essentially most of the same components of an RFP as far as defining a scope and naming some qualifications that the firm must have. So in determining this, in the past, when the only other time MSARA obtained an information roadmap, an IT roadmap, or hired an IT consultant, the board was heavily involved because that was the lead up to replacing or obtaining our pension administration system. I want to know what level of involvement the board would like. Certainly we can utilize an ad hoc committee with trustees for evaluation of the candidate proposals. If the board wants to be involved with that, do you want to see finalist presentations, or do you want a presentation at the end once the IT roadmap is finished to see the product that came out of that? Would you want the vendor to present that? Would that be something you would want presented from staff? Because all of those things are going to affect the requirements I put in the document that we issued, whether or not there could potentially be finalist interviews with the board, whether or not they would have to be done in person because we would need to have those travel costs, and that information is all necessary to wrap up the RFP requirements so the vendor knows what's expected of them.
I might input before I take other comments that we did have an ad hoc committee for the selection of Mosaic for the strategic plan, and I thought that worked very well. I think Trustee Anderson, who also served on it, appreciated that ad hoc committee. So my personal view is to have an ad hoc committee, if any of the trustees are interested. I don't think the board as a whole necessarily needs to require presentations and make the final decision, but I think it would be nice to have the finalist, the person who is hired, give a presentation to the board, and it could be on Zoom as far as I'm concerned.
As far as after the plan is complete,
Yes.
Presentation of the completed plan to the
Yes.
board via Zoom.
Yes.
All right, so that's open for discussion with,
Yes. Other trustee thoughts? Catherine?
I was just curious if any of this is, of these developments are mandated by the county of our IT plan.
I would say no, and not mandated by the county. Now, I do have in the draft proposal document that they would need to review what services we're getting from the county and what our reliances are, risks associated with that, alternatives potentially as far as identifying options. And I notified IT already that we will be issuing this and may need a little bit of their cooperation in answering questions that our consultant came up with. IT was responsive to that. They appreciated the heads up that we would be engaging in this and gave me the contact person who would be working with us for any questions that the consultant may have regarding our IT infrastructure.
Okay, thanks.
Preferences by any other trustees?
I'm of a similar opinion as the chair. And the choices made by staff and committee, and then the presentation feasibly by Zoom or in person at the end.
Do I have trustees who would like to volunteer to be on the IT ad hoc committee?
I'll do it if you can't get anybody else, but I'm probably the biggest Luddite out here, so I don't know if I'm a good choice.
Well, we always accept volunteers, but
Now, I would mention that we potentially would have a new committee member in July. We could make the committee at a future meeting because it's going to take us a little bit to issue the RFP or RFQ and actually get responses. That decision doesn't necessarily have to be made today. I am assuming that the committee, if formed, doesn't want to look at the request for quotes before it's issued.
No. I wouldn't think so. Well, think about it and we will, make that appointment at a later date, but please do consider getting involved. Thank you.
If I may, through the chair, if you do bring it back, I suggest you pull it out as a separate item and not have it within the admin report.
Yes, I'm sorry, we could,
We'll have appointment to the audit committee as well to replace.
Julie wasn't on the audit committee, was she?
I was the secretary.
Oh,
I think you'll have
okay.
to deal with that.
Yeah,
Yeah, it was really hard. Thank you
Yes.
for Richard. It was
You
difficult.
get brownie points, you
Yeah.
put it on your resume, you're
Title,
like, how
yeah.
much do you really do? The next item in the administrative report was just a reminder about the county's transition to Office 365 and Outlook. We have been transitioning trustees to using the county provided email addresses, and we will stop using personal email addresses for any board communications effective June 30, 2022. If you have not already set up access to your MendocinoCounty.org email address, you can reach out to Judy if you need assistance. If you want it on your phone, you do need to download the app on your phone. But you can access the Outlook basically from any web-connected device. So you should be able to do it on your iPad or your laptop or your PC at home, whatever, and still access the county's.
it will require working with IS to assist you in resetting your password. Your password requirement now has to be at least 12 characters. So would be adding the Outlook icon to your iPad desktop and then updating your password in order to be able to log in.
So you have about 2 weeks to wrap up that transition. Okay, and I also attached the Sackers legislative update for your review. There are a couple of assembly bills that would affect the potential for long-term teleconferencing options. And I gave you a little bit of information regarding that in the board memo. Both of them, I believe, would require that a quorum of the board, which would be at least 5 trustees, be present at the physical meeting site in order to allow teleconferencing for other trustees. But those are both still in the legislature, have not yet been passed to the governor. Okay, any other questions regarding any of the legislative updates?
Any other questions regarding anything on the administrative report? Okay, thank you. So let's move on to agenda item 18. Are there any general board member discussion items or announcements or anything? Except for thank you again to Julie, yeah. Trustee Cromer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I already let the executive director know, but I will not be in attendance during next month's meeting due to a pre-planned vacation. So I will not be in the July meeting.
Have fun. That'll be good.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Madam Chair,
Yes, Richard.
so obviously we'll get more of us in person, but having worked with this system we're currently working with in a number of places, I should have brought this up maybe earlier. I believe the best way to do this Zoom meeting when you're off-site is to use the speaker view, which is up in your right-hand corner. Using the owl, it gives you individual pictures of everybody involved, and it gives you the big panorama of the room. And then below that, it focuses on each of the speakers that are in the actual meeting room, and they are a good size to view. So if you haven't used that speaker view and do not use full screen, I would suggest you try it that way.
Okay, thank you, Richard. So we are going to move into our second closed session today. which will just be the trustees and our attorney, Jeff. So we are gonna take a break, let's say, I don't know, 10-minute break, so we'll come back at whatever that means it is, 10:37. How's that? Or 10:40, somewhere in Okay. Jeff,
Um,
please report out.
So item 19, closed session, the board met to discuss the performance evaluation of the executive director. No action was taken and the evaluation was not given yet.
Thank you. So our next meeting is Wednesday, July 20th at 8:30 a.m. And if there's no further business, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you all, trustees.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody.
Bye.
Have a good vacation, Quincy.
Yeah.
Thank you. I will, thank you.